Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight is a video I want to share that I came across earlier today. It popped up on my timeline on my Instagram channel, and when I saw this lady speaking, I'm like, definitely, I have to share this video with subscribers or anybody else who stumbles across my channel. I mean, it was inspiring. It was just to see this woman at the advanced age that she is and still has this fire about herself to talk about the situation in Brazil. So that's why I wanted to share this. Let's get right into this video for today. The name of the video is "We're just as intelligent, just as capable as white people. We are behind because they forbade us from everything," says 100-year-old activist. 100 years old, this woman has lived a century. So before I get into her story and what she was talking about, why I felt like I had to cover this video, share this video, definitely, if you could just do me the favor, just take a second right now, subscribe to this channel, share this video, click on the notification bell so that, maybe other people can see this same video. As I always do, there's highlights of things that she said that I will want to explain as I go along. So put this, this video into context. And I'm going to overdub something that she said. It's a small piece of an interview that she did. It was shown on Brazilian television. So with that said, let's get directly into this video for today. Okay. What this lady was talking about is she was making references to the vast inequalities that fall along lines of color and race in Brazil. When, I've done other videos where I highlight some of the statistics and the vast inequalities in between the white and non-white population in Brazil, whether it's education, whether it's how much money people make, black males, black females, white men, white women, what the chances are of people being able to get into the university, what type of jobs they get when they get out of the university. It's just everywhere you look in Brazil, as much as Brazil says, no, it's not our society that's, extremely racist, it's other countries, right? But then when you look at the data, it's like, how can you continue to say that? Another thing I wanted to point out is that Brazil has done an experiment with affirmative action policy since about 1999, 2000. And the number of universities across the country that have participating in the affirmative action program, it's just grown over the years. And over, black Brazilians, or if you say black and brown Brazilians, you can see that they are capable of, reaching the highest levels of education. You got people going on to master's and PhD degrees. So it's just, it's a lack of opportunity. The university space used to always be a place for just white Brazilians. And, most people who have lived in Brazil or who have studied the situation in Brazil, they know that this is nothing that's new. Also, what she's going to talk about is the racial hierarchy that affects the psyche of not only black and brown people, but also white people, because the situation between these groups, it becomes naturalized because, people come to accept that only white people have access to certain areas of the country, whether it be a university setting, nice neighborhoods, nice restaurants. And black people they're not supposed to be in those same places. So that when black people do frequent these areas, people look at them like, what are you guys doing here? So it affects the psyche. How can people have the wherewithal to want to fight for something when they feel like they don't belong there? And I've just read hundreds of stories over the years that talk about the psyche. Before people can even reach a certain point in society, they've already been psychologically depressed or eliminated themselves because they feel like this is not a place for me. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the 100-year-old activist. They call her Dona Santinha. Okay. So I saw her on, I think it was TV Brazil or Brazil TV. And, she participated in a longer roundtable discussion. The discussion features several black women, including her granddaughter or her great granddaughter. Also in the video, you'll see, I think her name is Kathleen Conceição. She is known as the first Black dermatologist who has specifically dealt with issues of Black skin in Brazil. There were a number of other Black women activists in this video. This video was actually recorded, I believe, around July 25th, which is the International Day of the Black, Latin American, and Caribbean Black women, right? I've covered this on various blog posts over at blackbraziltoday.com. Definitely go over there, check out some of these articles, almost 4,000 articles over there. So let's find out. Let's listen to what Dona Santinha had to say. And you listen in this short clip, 2 minutes long, why I felt the need to just share this video with my subscribers. So right now, I'm just going to overdub what she had to say, and I'm going to come back and react to it. We're just as intelligent, just as capable as white people. There's no justification for prisons being full of only Black people, for street dwellers being Black, for the best jobs being Black. We often outperform the white people who occupy that position. Because the only difference between us is the color of our skin. It's the only difference. But intelligence in anything that requires any function, we are just as capable as white people. And why are we behind? Because they left us, they stopped us, they forbade us from everything. The white immigrants, when they came here, I knew a grown son who said that his father, an engineer, when he arrived, he was given land and he divided it up. The Black man, freed, even if he had money, couldn't buy land. Why are we fighting to change this now? Because if someone has walked 100 steps ahead, we'll never get there if we don't have something. There have to be quotas and everything possible to make up for lost time. Not only with our intelligence, with our power. With these barriers, we will never ascend. So the intelligent, sensitive white man has to see that he is privileged. He's always been privileged, and that this has to change. And it happens. I meet many white people with the same intelligent vision who help us that nobody does anything alone. So you heard what Dona Santinha had to say. I mean, it's not hard to tell. A lot of things that she said is just very clear for anybody who studied the situation of race in Brazil, race and color, if you prefer. Like I said, this little 2-minute clip was part of a bigger discussion with all of the women that were on this panel, just discussing these issues, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about who is this woman? Who is Dona Santinha? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with, like Dona is kind of just a term of respect in Brazil for a woman, like a homemaker or somebody's wife. So they refer to her as Dona, not as in Donna. In English, we use it as a name, but in Brazil, it's kind of a term of respect for women, right? So Maria dos Santos Soares, better known as Dona Santinha, she was born in April of 1924. The 100-year-old native of Minas Gerais state is one of the symbols of the protest in Rio de Janeiro. Present in feminist, anti-racist, LGBT plus movements and mobilizations against evictions and privatizations, Dona Santinha is synonymous with struggle. She also became a symbol of resistance during the demonstrations following the death of the Rio de Janeiro city councilwoman Marielle Franco, who was brutally murdered in a professional-style hit in March of 2018. You may have heard that, 2 or 3 of the men who were found to be part of that brutal assassination have been, the cases come up and they've been convicted. The retired nurse became politically engaged after the death of her brother, a Communist Party activist, in 1984. On his deathbed, she promised that she will continue his fight, and she does, even having passed 100 years of life. My main fight is for Black people because of the situation they put us in, but my activism is for humanity. I don't know why I'm here. Maybe my life is responsible for this because I can't remain indifferent to what surrounds me. Everything I think is wrong, I want to do something about it, she said upon receiving she received this honor for her activism. Dona Santinha said, I stopped watching TV because there were only white people on it. Maria hasn't had a TV. She hasn't had a TV in over a decade. She got tired of waiting to see herself represented on the screen. And although she feels that there has been an improvement in a number of Black people in jobs and prominent positions, it's still not what she expects from the programming of a country with a Black and brown majority. Sometimes I would wait 30, 40 minutes, but there would only be white people on TV. And that's when the majority of the population is Black. Why is that? Even so, it's gotten better. In the past, I would go to 10, 20 pharmacies and not find a single Black person. To buy a doll, I would go to 50 stores and not find one. Now there's a little Black doll. What can you do? The world is in the hands of white people, she says, having lost count of the number of times she's been a victim of racism. I used to go to a store downtown whose name I've forgotten, and they told me, Madam, we don't serve Black people here. Today, they may not want to, but they don't say that anymore. Something has changed, she reflects. So look at everything that she said here. I mean, everything is so pertinent. I had to talk about this because many of the topics that she's talking about are things that I've talked about, on the blog for years, as well as on this YouTube channel. So I'm going to come back to some of the highlights of what she was talking about. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what she said in terms of, well, you all have blocked us. You've prohibited us. You've made it difficult for us. And some people will look and say, well, what is she talking about? I mean, as Americans, many of us know the history of how Black Americans were blocked from mainstream society and had to fight to get there. In many ways, the struggle is similar in Brazil. Even without so-called laws that says, Blacks here and whites there, you never had officially legally mandated or sanctioned segregation in Brazil. But Brazil is segregated in that same way without the laws. Because as you just said, or as Dona Santinha said in the video, she says, Madam, we don't serve Black people here. And this just adds to the point of what I've said. You don't have to have legalized segregation for this type of system of a racial hierarchy to exist. I've said before that when I lived in Sao Paulo, I spoke to this woman who's in her mid 80s now, and she came from a city called Três Rios in the state of Rio de Janeiro state. The town she was from was several hours from Rio de Janeiro, the city, but she talked about this, when she came to Sao Paulo, I think in the 1950s, and she says, Mark, when I first came to Sao Paulo, Black people were not allowed in the movie theaters. So this is what I'm saying. When you talk to people of the older generation, those people who are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, they remember this strict, ideal that says Black people don't belong here, even without any type of laws of segregation. But she says, why is it that we're so far behind? And then she talked a little bit about that. So right now, what I want to talk about is what's called the land law and how it perpetuated the oppression of Black people in Brazil. This piece is by Ivanildo Terceiro. And the article goes, officially Brazilian slavery, the only one remaining in the independent countries of the American continent, was abolished on May 13th, 1888. Of course, it wasn't a law signed by the aristocracy that would solve the problems of those who had their labor and dignity stolen from them. The environment had been shaped for around 40 years so that this would happen in the least painful way possible for the slave owners. Under British pressure, Brazil had already begun to take some steps towards ending slavery. The most emblematic and ineffective law was for the English to see, which I'll talk about in a minute. The Feijão Law, which was sanctioned in 1832, nominally giving freedom to slaves who landed in the country, but it was only in 1850 that the Eusébio de Queiroz Law more effectively banned the slave trade into national territory. The end of slavery in Brazil was at least well signaled, although many measures taken served to extend the life of the regime. Now, I want to talk about this idea of, in Brazil, they say, para os inglês ver. What this means, it translated as law for the English to see. It was Britain that was pushing for the abolition of slavery. And Brazilian society depended so heavily on slavery that they didn't want to end it. So we're talking about within the first, 20 to 30 years of the 19th century, Brazil agreed to, we're going to ban the entry of slaves. We're going to slowly end the slave trade and the dependence on slave labor. But they only did that on the surface. So for the English to see, it just means to appease Britain. They pretended that they would slowly end slavery and they would stop the trade of slavery within the country, but it was all window dressing. They kept going on with standard procedure in terms of the slavery regime, and it lasted into 1888. So it was just kind of like, again, window dressing for the English to see. They wanted to deceive the British into believing that they were pushing forward with change to end the slavery era. And even after that, it took like another 60, 50 or 60 years after that. So it was just window dressing. In 1871, the so-called free womb law was passed, freeing the children of slaves who would remain under the care of their masters or the state until the age of 21, enslaved in the same way. In 1885, the sexagenarians law freed slaves over the age of 65, effectively giving masters a license to dispose of their slaves. Finally, abolition occurred with what was called the Golden Law, which freed all the remaining slaves in Brazil on May 13th of 1888. It was to be expected that such measures would serve to continue white privilege, but none of them compared to the inhumanity that would be perpetuated to this day by the less famous land law of 20 years earlier. I always want to remind you that Brazil imported anywhere from 10 to 15 times more enslaved Africans than the United States did. Brazil received like 40 to 45% of all enslaved Africans that came to the Americas. Just imagine that. Brazil received almost half of all the enslaved Africans sent to the New World, divided up in a number of countries that were practicing slavery. So, past just 2 weeks after the Eusebio de Queiroz Law 601 of September 18th, 1850, established the end of land appropriation. No more land could be appropriated through labor, but only by purchase from the state. The land already occupied would be measured and subject to the conditions of use, or once again, it would be in the hands of the state, which would sell it to whoever it chose. As well as preventing slaves from gaining possession of land through work, the land law provided for government subsidies for settlers to come from abroad to be hired in the country, further devaluing the work of Black men and women. So effectively, we know that, and I've talked about this over and over, Brazil wanted to whiten the country. With the coming of the end of the slave era, Brazil opened its borders to 4 million European immigrants to come into the country. That gave them everything they needed to get by, while they just left the former enslaved on their own, okay, you guys are free, go earn a living. They weren't compensated for anything. They weren't given anything, no land, no type of reconstruction, right? Slaves were just left to their own accord, while the government was giving like subsidies and plots of land for the incoming European immigrants to survive. When abolition took place, Blacks were abandoned to their fate with no reparations, no compensation, and no land, even though no amount was enough for a lifetime of forced and inhumane labor. They couldn't cultivate the land, and they didn't have the money to buy it directly from the state, which in any case had the power to determine who would own the land. And Blacks certainly weren't at the top of the list. What was left for the Black population was to flee to the cities to live in tenements, what would become favelas, the makeshift homes in the hills of major cities, dependent, selling their labor for starvation wages. When you think about that, it's just kind of absurd, because it just says we don't really care what happens to Black people. How is it that it was a necessity to bring in 4 million European immigrants when the enslaved who had maintained the country for 350 years, they were capable of doing all type of labor, but they just like threw these people out in the streets and brought in Europeans, saying, we want to whiten the country. We're going to progressively promote miscegenation, so that within 2 to 3 generations of continuous mixing with the white population, they hope that the Black and brown population would disappear, which, numerous videos have talked about that. The world scenario at the time was already calling for an end to slavery, but Brazil put the brakes on all the advances of abolitionism, brakes that shaped what the possibilities of the Black population would be, perpetuating white privilege. When we look around us, we notice that the skin color of the most marginalized and exploited in society is different from that of the elite. This was no accident. It was the intended result of a series of measures to keep the Black people in submission, such as the land law. In his autobiography, the great abolitionist and liberal Joaquim Nabuco said in 1900, slavery will long remain the national characteristic of Brazil. Exactly. And in other videos, I've mentioned how, slavery ended, like 136 years ago in Brazil. Brazil was the last country to abolish slavery in the Americas. But the social and racial hierarchy in Brazil is such that Brazilian society continues to treat those who are not white as if they were still slaves. I did another video, a video I did I think it was last week, where there was a black guy who was talking about how a white man walked up to him and says, if we were in a slave era, you'd be a very high priced slave. Every day you have, white Brazilians making references to slavery, as if slavery still exists in Brazil, right? So all of the things that this woman said in her video, I noticed that there were at least two women who were shedding tears because of listening to the force in the voice of this 100-year-old woman. So right now, what I want to do is I just want to put more into context some of the stuff that she was talking about. She talking about why are the prisons in Brazil full of black people, or we could say black and brown people. In 2019, 5 years ago, there were 812 prisoners, black people and people from the periphery of cities where are those who are most imprisoned in Brazil. Brazil became one of the most imprisoned population in the world. I think at the time it was behind like United States, China, and Russia. Brazil is like in the top four of the country that has the most imprisoned people in the world, behind those three countries that I just noted. They might be in position 3 now. I have to look that up, but the numbers of the prison population have been exploding in Brazil. Look at this. Number of women prisoners in Brazil grows by 700% in 16 years. In the state of Acre, 100% of the female prisoners are black and brown women. Okay, so those are just some of the facts about the prison system in Brazil. Various articles, some say 60%, some say 70, some say it's more than 70% of the majority of the population in Brazil who are in prison are black and brown people. We say pretos and pardos. Then we talk about the need for quotas in Brazil. So as I've said, they've been going on since late 99, 2000. We're talking about almost a quarter century of quotas, affirmative action in Brazil. But still today, look at this article from 2021. I was the only one in my graduating class. 20 years after Brazilian universities began affirmative action, college is still a lonely experience for black students. There was I had to dispute this. The majority in public universities in Brazil are black, and that's kind of a misleading. If you say black and brown, that's true. But even people who have, visited college campuses in Brazil say that's kind of it's kind of mythical. If you count pardos and pretos, black and brown people, you might be able to say that, but it's just kind of misleading to say that public universities in Brazil are majority black. So these are all articles where I've talked about the universities in Brazil, the number of there's been thousands of cases of white Brazilians who have switched their color classification to take advantage of the quota system in Brazil. There's other videos I've done talking about that. Then we have the question of immigration. When Brazil opened its borders towards as slavery was coming to an end in the late 19th century, they actually made sure that no other Africans, they prohibited other Africans from coming to the country. For a while, they prohibited Asians from coming into the country. And it was like this article says right here, Brazil loves immigrants, but only if they're the right color. Haitians and African immigrants have talked about how they've been treated in Brazil when they, moved to, one of the states in the country. They're constantly discriminated against. They're harassed by Brazilians. They've been killed by police. What else do we have here? Haitians, you steal our jobs. Xenophobia and racism flare up again as 6 Haitian immigrants were shot in Sao Paulo. I want to talk about this particular article right here, because for years, the debate over affirmative action says that, well, it's not fair to other people who got into the university without quotas that you start giving quotas to black and brown people, black, brown, and indigenous, actually. But then people want to totally gloss over the idea of the ungrateful quota beneficiaries when affirmative action in Brazil only benefited white immigrants. So as I said, Brazil opened its borders to about 4 million European immigrants between like 1870 and 1940, mostly from like Italy, Germany. You had people from Poland, Portugal, Spain that were coming into Brazil, like pictures like this. European immigrants were brought into the country. They were allowed to come into the country. And the colonization policies of the country were the concrete applications of quota policies. Servants, peasants, mercenaries, bandits, thieves, and prostitutes from Europe were motioned with quota utopia. Offered to them first was their place of their own, or a place of their own, a space to produce, represented by a plot of land, a colony in order that they could sow their dream. And they attained oxen, plows, agricultural implements, seeds, and the right to use nature, forests, rivers, and minerals to capitalize. In the process, thousands didn't manage to pay the colonial debt and were pardoned. And when they were in debt, And when they indemnified, they were in modest conditions. So the point here is, when quotas were set up for non-white people, the country's in an uproar. But when 4 million European immigrants came in and just basically stepped over black people who the government just left to their own accord, nobody complained about that. Long history of talking about European immigration in Brazil. It's like, okay, where's the fairness in this? Then we have an argument that a lot of people have made about the quota system in Brazil that says if you start allowing quotas for black, brown, and indigenous people to get into university, it's going to lower the quality of the education because they won't be able to perform equally to those who didn't get in under quotas. But test after test, study after study has shown that this is a myth, because scores of quota students entering this federal university exceeded those of non-quota students on the last entrance exam. So this is a study from 2008. It's 2016. There are other articles that have shown why have quotas worked out in Brazil. Is because black and brown people just needed the opportunity to show that they were just as good students as other people who did not get in through the quota system. We talked about Marielle Franco, her assassination in March 14th of 2018. It shocked the world. There were protests. Millions of people took to the streets against the brutal assassination of this well-loved Rio City councilwoman. They have, I think, like I said, a couple of months ago, like 3 men who were shown to be connected to this assassination. They were brought up on charges and arrested. I think they were sentenced a couple of months ago. I'm not sure. I forget what stage that is in now. I think they have been sentenced, but they're still trying to find out who are the people who called for the assassination of Marielle Franco. Then she mentioned, Dona Santinha mentioned the lack of black dials. This is from 2019. In a market where black dials only make up 7% of the total, a founder estimates that she will sell 10,000 black dials a month. You just didn't find many black dials in Brazil. 7% of the market showed a black dial. So with so many children in Brazil, and a large percentage of that, if the majority being black and brown kids or girls and boys, and they can't find dials that are black or brown. That's why this girl came up with the idea of creating her own dials, right? Actress Chris Viana, and the importance of having black dials, even with them being rare in Brazil, she has a collection of about 60 to 70 black dials. That's from 2017. Singer Larissa Luz gives voice to the rising demand for black representation in the toy market with her song Bonecas Pretas, meaning black dials. So that's something else that I wanted to talk about. There's an article here, a black dial. No, mommy, I don't want it. This is based on a true story. So anyway, that's why I wanted to focus on this story about Dona, what is her name again? I'm forgetting. Santinha. It was incredible what she talked about. And as I said, you saw some of the women that were choked up and brought to tears by listening to this woman's words. So that's why I wanted to, share this video with my subscribers and those who might stumble across this video, because, this video hit me. 100 years old, and this woman still got the strength to talk about the problems in Brazil. Anyway, what did you all think about today's video and the story behind this Dona Santinha? What did you think about the story? Drop a comment in the comment section. Let's discuss this. Definitely like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, consider clicking on that notification bell so that you'll know when I put up a new video. With that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I'll post here at Black Brazil Today.